I have now read over 200 nonfiction, self-help, business, all sorts of nonfiction genre books now. Yay, congratulations. So this is actually a pretty big milestone. And I wanted to share 20 lessons that I have learned over the past few years of reading 200 nonfiction books. There are definitely a whole lot more than that, but I just, I had to brainstorm the ideas and I just came up with 20 because it sounded like a nice number. It's 10% of 200. So yeah, so in this video, I'll just cover the 20 tips or things that I learned about reading, learning, and life. I specifically focused it more on the reading aspects because that's what this channel is about. So let's get into it. The very first one here is the more you read, the more you realize that there's so much more to learn. I mean, 200 nonfiction books is quite a lot, but there are millions, if not billions, of books out there. So yeah, after reading all these books, I realized I have so much more that I can learn. And that is actually an exciting, a very, very exciting thing because it motivates me to continue to learn about what I love learning about, about education, about psychology, about business. Anything I want to learn about, I can continue to do so. And I know that there will be a never ending supply of things that I can learn about. And the second one is about reflection. I found that after a while of reading, when I first started, I just would read from cover to cover of the book. And then as I got better at learning and better at reading, what I would do is I would start to reflect on the different aspects of what I was reading. Now I have a whole process of reflection where I will read a particular session, a certain amount of pages, a certain amount of time, and I will take the different aspects, the most important aspects that I have, that really relate to my life, my interests, and the problems that I want to solve. I take those small aspects from my reading session, and then I will expand with my own ideas and my own thoughts and base it on maybe the experiences and other things that I've learned in my life. So reflection is a huge process of learning, and it's a huge process of actually internalizing the knowledge that you gain in books and whatever else that you learn. So use a notebook, use an application, whatever is required. Use voice notes, record yourself, whatever is required for you to reflect. It is a huge benefit and it will help you to grow as a learner. Number 3 is 20% reading and 80% experimenting and writing and whatever it is that actually gets you up off your seat, out from your bookshelf, out from the book itself, right? Whatever gets you out there and doing something to actually put what you've learned into action. So about 20% of my time that I have available for myself and for my learning processes and progressing as a human being, I only spend about 20% of that time on actual reading. So each day, maybe I will only spend about a half an hour reading, and then I will spend like an hour and a half or more that actually work. Yeah, that works to like 25%, right? So it doesn't have to be an exact number, but the key here is that you're spending more time outside of the books than you are in the books. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't, read for, hours upon hours per day. That's okay. As long as you are also getting out there and doing something with that knowledge. It may not be the same every single day. Maybe some days you might read 50% of your time. right? Other days you might only read 10% of the time. You just have to find the right balance. And for me, it's approximately 20%. So yeah, that's a huge one. Number 4 is reading does not make you an expert. I could sit here reading my books all day long. It doesn't make you an expert. Action does. So yeah, you have to read, you have to learn any way you possibly can, you have to. Uh, but you also have to balance it with action. So the thing that actually makes you an expert is being able to make those connections and then apply those connections, apply the knowledge. Because, well, if I'm not applying the knowledge, then no one will know, right? If you're not applying the knowledge, no one will know about your expertise, right? You have to get something out there. You have to produce something tangible that people can look at and see. And I shouldn't say you have to. No one has to do anything. If you don't want to be the expert out in front of every single person, then you don't have to be. But in order to be, you actually have to make the effort and produce something tangible. So I guess that's what this one is all about, is sitting behind your desk and reading all the books in the world is not going to make you recognized as an expert. Maybe you will be an expert up here, but out there in the world, probably not. And number 5 is mix fiction in with all of your other nonfiction books, right? Once in a while, maybe 1 out of 10 books, you could make a fiction book, or 1 out of 5 books, you could make a fiction book. That's totally up to you. For me personally, I like to mix fiction into my reading habits, because fiction has its own magical power, and we can also learn a whole lot from fiction. We can learn a whole lot about psychology. We can learn so many different things. We can also read fiction just for pure entertainment, which sometimes is just the thing we need to help ourselves to become more creative and more just more able to produce something that matters. So fiction is huge in my life. I probably read about 1 fiction book per every 10 nonfiction books, maybe even less, a little bit, but still, I'm throwing it in the mix. I always have a fiction book going on along with my other books. So fiction is awesome. And as this is a video about commemorating my 200 books read for nonfiction books, I also just want to mention that there are so few life-changing books out there. Out of the 200 nonfiction books that I've read, I would say probably about 20, maybe 20 of them are truly life-changing. Could be even a little bit less, but that's just a guesstimate of how many of those books are truly life-changing. That does not mean that the rest of the 180 books didn't have some sort of impact on my life. It's just saying that out of those 200 books, I would definitely revisit the 20 ones that were really life-changing. Those are the ones that I would cherish and hold on to. And if I had to get rid of all my other books, those 20 books would be the ones that I would want to keep in my possession, because I love them so much. So yeah, and that goes to say, like, when we're picking books, we have to be very, very careful when we go out there and pick books, because we only have a finite amount of time to read. To read. Maybe in our lifetime, we might only read 1,000 books or 1,500. Some of us may only read 500 books. Some of them maybe even less, right? So the point is that we have to like really choose carefully. We have to analyze the book before we even pick it up. We have to look at the covers and look at the index, look at the table of contents, and we have to decide, is this a book worthy of my time and money? Because I only have a finite amount of time to do this. So really, I highly recommend researching the books before you actually start reading the books. And some of my points later on will cover some of these aspects of how to actually choose a book. So definitely is a really big one. And let's go on to the next. One of the reading philosophies that I have is that every single book out there has a golden nugget in it. No matter how good or bad you think the book is, there's something within that book that will be able to impact your life. So always go in with the mindset when you're picking up a book and reading a book. Always go in thinking there is something in here that can make a difference in my life, and try to search for that thing, and then take the best advantage that you can by trying to apply that golden nugget in your life. If there's more than one golden nugget, or maybe there's 5, or maybe there's 10, great, fantastic. Take note of all those golden nuggets that you get from the books that you read, and then just try to apply those, try to experiment, and try to adapt those golden nuggets into your life. Okay, and tip number 8 here is the 3 things that I personally look for before I actually pick up a book, before I buy it, before I start investing my time into it. So I always look for, one, is the topic something of interest? Do I really feel like this book is going to be interesting to me? Sometimes when I'm browsing through Amazon, I will take note of books that are just interesting to me, not necessarily like helping me solve a problem or anything like that, or helping me to progress professionally, which are the 2 other aspects of this tip right here. But if it's just like a topic that, hey, I want to read about it, maybe it's a topic about economics or history, or maybe it's a biography, and it just catches my interest. So I will save that book on my wish list of books that are just of interest to me. And then when the time comes, maybe I will buy that book. Maybe I won't. Maybe I will never read the book. The point is that I'm taking note of it. And if the time comes, then I will get a hold of it. Maybe I see it on discount and I'm like, okay, I'm going to snatch up that book that was of interest to me in 2018 that I never got, right? So that's the first one. The second one is solving a problem. So you have a problem in your life right now, you need to solve it. So you try to go look for a book that helps you to solve that problem. Boom, that's an immediate grab. Of course, you need to go solve that problem, and you need to discover and research about what are the solutions to that problem. And then the third one is a book that will help you to progress professionally in your career. And even if it's not directly related to your career, like let's say, I don't know, finances or something like that, right? Even if it's not directly related, maybe it will still help you in your career. So those are the 3 things that I always look for before I pick up a book, before I buy a book and add it to my collection. And number 9 is, it's okay to stop reading a book. A lot of people have a problem with stopping a book. They just say, I invested in this book. I've already invested time in this book, and I don't want to stop reading it. But maybe the book is just really bad for them at the time. That doesn't mean that you can't pick up the book at a later date. Maybe the book was just too difficult for you, maybe, and it's okay to stop and maybe pick up the book at a later date. If someone had lent you that book and they want it back, and you had to stop reading it, well, maybe you can pick up a copy of your own later, right? So the point is, don't feel bad for stopping a book. If it's really bad, that's okay. You can stop. The author will not take offense because the author will not know that you've stopped reading their book unless you talk with the author directly, right? So it's okay. Save your time, invest in another book that will be more life changing for you. So the average book is probably around 200 or so pages, maybe a little bit more. And there's a lot of information in a book. 200 some odd pages, a lot of information. So when we're reading through that book, we have to get in the mindset that, okay, I'm only going to be looking for the certain aspects that are going to be able to help me out in this particular area or follow my interests or anything like that. So whenever you're reading, you have to have a goal in mind before you start reading the book, and then search for those specific aspects, because it's impossible to remember every single page in the book. Plus, there's not going to be useful information on every single page, or maybe it's not relevant to you at that time. So the point here is that you're looking for anything that is relevant for you at this time. And then the rest of it is either something that you can save away for later, and then you can reference the book again when you need it, or just maybe it's just fluff and you won't need it at all in the future. So look for those specific nuggets, the golden nuggets, I guess, that are very relevant to you at this time. And that will help you to remember what you read. If you have an aim, it will help you to remember. Always remember the aim before you start. It's a really good tip to remember. Which goes on to my next point, which is kind of related, is a lot of books are filled with fluff. Whether that has to do with like the publisher's requirements or the editor or something like that. A 200-page book could be summarized into 100 pages or maybe even 50 pages, depends on what it is. And so you will get the majority of the takeaways in a smaller portion of the book compared to the whole 200 some odd pages. Most books are definitely filled with fluff, or not necessarily fluff. Maybe they're filled with examples and stories, which are also very important. That's why I do not recommend just reading summaries, because summaries don't have those stories or examples. Summaries just have the golden nuggets. And in order to make sense of those golden nuggets, maybe you need the examples and the stories. That's why those are important. But yeah, basically the point of this tip right here is that a lot of books are filled with fluff. Therefore, we need to sort through that fluff by having the aim, which was in the previous point. All right. And point number 12 is reading long books actually doesn't have to be hard. I think some of the longest books I've read were 1,100 pages plus. I've probably read a few books that were over 1,000 pages long. And the key to not being like stressed out about books that are that long, or freaked out, or like, hey, I don't even want to get started because the book is way too long, whatever your excuse is, the key to solving that is just approach the book like you would any other book. Maybe you're only going to read the book for like 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and then you keep that consistent habit every single day, 15, 20, 30 minutes per day reading that book. And you just do it every single day. And you will be able to finish the book in no time, No, it could still take you months upon months to finish. But if it's a really good book, then you might as well keep on going. Of course, if it's taking you a really long time, maybe you're just not interested in the book, it's not resonating with you well, then take my previous tip, which was talking about it's okay to stop a book. You can always pick it back up later, not a problem. But yeah, approach big books just like you would approach any other book with a consistent habit. A little bit every single day gets you very far in the long run. So take that tip to heart. As a reader, sometimes a reader, a learner, academic, sometimes we get so absorbed in our world. We're sitting here at our bookshelf, our desks. We're in heaven with all the books that we have surrounding us. Sometimes we forget that actually there's other forms of learning. There's a great one out there that I love to access. YouTube. YouTube has a great search engine. We can access so many great creator videos out there. So take advantage of all the different ways that we can learn, including experience. We're putting all this knowledge that we gain from the books into action, getting out there and doing action and experimenting, including writing. Writing is a form of action as well. Don't forget that. Just because you're sitting at your desk writing doesn't mean that you're not taking action. So doing this is actually also another form of learning. When we're sitting there writing, or we're sitting there and we're going outside and doing our experiment, or people watching, or whatever it may be that we're doing, that's also another form of learning. So try to think of other forms of learning and then go out there and experiment with it and learn. Don't just sit in front of your bookshelf and read books all the time without getting up off of your desk and going outside, getting some fresh air and interacting and doing the work. Doing the work gets you results. Sitting there reading all the time does not. So take that tip, use a bunch of forms of learning, and you'll do great. And tip number 14 is read in themes. Start with a very wide theme, maybe try to cover a whole lot of different topics, and then start to narrow down. Now, of course, this is maybe if you don't know what your expertise is, then yeah, start reading very, very widely, and then narrow as you start to discover whatever it is that you truly are in love with. Narrow down that topic. It's okay to still read other topics. So I usually have a couple books going on at once. So like maybe 2 or 3 books will be about my expertise. And then there will be another book that I'm reading that's totally just out there in the blue, unrelated to my expertise, which helps to broaden my perspective. But when I first started reading in 2015, when I started reading avidly, I would read from a very wide, broad perspective, because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my life or with my career. So I just started reading all sorts of topics that were interesting to me. And of course, I still do that now. It's important to continue to read broadly throughout your whole life. That way you can be introduced to new topics. So I hope this tip is useful. Read broadly, then narrow down to specific, but continue to read broadly, if that makes sense, but maybe not as in big of a proportion as you were when you were starting to read avidly. And number 15 is take your time with the best books that you've read or that you are reading. Take your time, ask questions, seek answers for those questions, and then have a conversation with the author. Even if you don't have the author sitting there, you don't have contact with the author, or maybe the author has already died years ago, try to have a conversation with the author within the book. You're reflecting on those takeaways, and then dig deeper by following the breadcrumbs that the author has left you. Within each book, there's usually a reference section. There's also the author cites other people's works within the book. So you have a very good reference there. If you really love that topic and you want to dig deeper, you want to see what that author has been reading themselves, go start reading what they have referenced in their book and follow the trail. In the next book that you read and you really love that book, do the same thing. And then, yeah, you can learn so much that way about one particular topic, because everything is connected in a certain way. Everything is connected in a certain way. It's amazing how lots of different things are connected. So yeah, that's a huge tip. And that's one of the tips that I've personally implemented in my life fairly recently, especially after starting my master's program. And I've just noticed all the relations you have to reference, you have to cite, you have to dig deeper and dig deeper. So as a graduate student, I've been using this tip to my advantage, like every single day, digging deeper into the trail that authors have left me. So yeah, take this tip to heart and try to implement it. And with this one, I would have to say it's really important, but it's not one that you would think of normally. If you are such an avid reader, such as myself, then you'll probably be reading a whole lot. And sometimes it gets a bit overwhelming. So my recommendation for tip number 16 is to take a break once in a while. For me, I have not taken a break from reading in over 2 years now. I've been reading for 732 days or 33 days, basically 2 years and 3 days. I've read a book every single day. But some days I'm only reading about 5 pages, right? Which is nothing compared to other days where I might be reading 50 or 100 pages. So yeah, the point here is that even if you're not taking a break from reading, at least slow down when you feel like you need to have time to reflect on the knowledge that you've picked up from the books. Take the time that where you slow down to actually maybe start implementing more. Because once you get to a point in your learning journey, you realize after reading 200 books that, okay, I've learned a whole lot. I need to also apply more. So I'm going to decrease the amount of time that I'm reading and increase the amount of time that I'm either relaxing a little bit or reflecting or doing something such as writing or working on a project with your team, collaboration, creating content. You name a list of a bunch of different activities that you're actually doing to actually get out there. That's why this tip is really good, because you can decrease the amounts of time that you're learning and taking action. Really good tip to follow and try to remember. And try to practice too. Okay, tip number 17 is steal like an artist. There's actually a book out there called Steal Like an Artist. I've never read the book myself. I've heard this quote before, steal like an artist, and I like to practice it. So, and I was also reading a Leonardo da Vinci biography by Walter Isaacson, and I believe it has that quote in there somewhere as well. So the point of this is that when you're reading all these different books, there's so many ideas that are passing through your mind. So you might as well, and it's not just with books, it's basically anything you see out there. You can take what other people are doing, you can adapt it to your own liking, and then you can put it out there. It's not actually stealing the same idea of what the other person is doing, but it's borrowing from that person and then adapting and changing and connecting all these different ideas together to create a whole new idea. Also, another way to interpret this is if there's a framework that works, like for, let's say you want to do a startup, you want to do an online business, or you want to build an online course, or you want to write a book, there is a framework that a lot of other people have followed and they know that it works. So it's okay to take frameworks that are proven successful and use that same framework. It's not illegal to steal that framework unless there's something like copyrighted or something like that. Be careful of what you take and what you make, as long as you're not breaking those copyright rules. But yeah, so there's lots of things that we can steal and adapt to our own liking, especially if it is something that is going to help us succeed at what we do, writing a book, making a project, launching a startup, whatever it may be. So steal nicely. And I've made a video on this next topic here before, so I will link it up in the top. Some of the others I've also made videos and blog posts and Instagram posts about before. So periodically throughout the video, you might see a link pop up. So if you're interested in that topic more, you can click on that. This next one is reading is not a hobby. So I see reading as an essential aspect of life, learning and reading and growing. It is an essential aspect of life. Even reading fiction books is an essential thing. It is not a hobby. It is something that we can do for relaxation, but still we're doing it with a purpose in mind to improve our well-being. If it's a fiction book, it's improving our emotional well-being. It is essential to do this in a world where we're like going 24/7, right? We're not really going 24/7, but you know what I mean. We're in a high stress society, so we need to find ways that we can become more mindful, and reading is a great way to do that. So it is essential. It's not a hobby. And then if we're talking about business books, nonfiction books, self-help books, whatever genre it is in the nonfiction genre, these are definitely not hobbies because they're there to help us improve ourselves, and improving ourselves is essential. So those of you watching, you probably don't need convincing about this, but I have not heard many people say that reading is not a hobby. And that's why I want to emphasize it, to help you spread the message that maybe other people think reading is a hobby. And then you say, no, reading is not a hobby. As Matt Hudson says, reading is not a hobby. It is an essential aspect of life. And we all need to practice it and realize that it's not a hobby. How many times did I say it's not a hobby? Many, many times. And that's okay. All right. And down to the last two. Number 19 is read analytically with focus. Focus being the emphasis here. So when we pick up a book, we need to make sure that we have no other distractions around us. We are in the mindset that we're going to get into this book and we're going to focus right on the words that are coming from the author's hand. And we're going to focus and analyze that text. We're going to ask questions and dig deeper in order to get the most out of that book as we possibly can. Reading analytically, reflecting, asking questions, all of these tips kind of play on each other. And this one is one of the very first ones that you want to do is focus. Get into that book with focus, with an aim. We are going to learn something today. Focus, focus, focus. And the last one that I have here for you today is reread your treasured books, the books that you have fallen in love with, the books that you know that you will learn something again from it when you reread it. I can name a couple off the top of my head. The Laws of Human Nature. I love to reread that one. And then exactly the opposite, a very thin book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And then another one that I would probably reread is right up there, Parent Like It Matters. That's a really cool one right there too. I mean, it's like those select few books that you probably would reread. And each time that you reread these books, you will find something maybe that you didn't notice before, partly because it's a different part of your life. Maybe your focus, your problem, your interests are maybe a little bit different. So it's important to dive into these books once in a while, once in a great while, maybe after a couple years of not reading that book, to dive into it again. The Four Agreements is such a tiny book. Sometimes I just pick it up and I read a chapter in just a short amount of time. You can just read certain aspects of the book. It's important to do this because it helps to refresh what you have learned in the past, because our memories are not perfect. So rereading something helps us to revitalize, reactivate that knowledge, and helps us to implement it again, helps to motivate us, right? There's so many positives of rereading a book. If it's a fiction book, then it helps us to relive the story. And yeah, there's just so many great things about rereading really, really good books, the treasures that you have on your bookshelf. So I put this one as last because it's such a special one to reminisce about the books that we read that have had a life-changing impact on our life. And yeah, I mean, there's so many great things about rereading. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of treasured books. Books are such a treasure, even if they're not as impactful as our favorite ones out there. So if you have stuck with me to the end of this video, or maybe you've skimmed through the video, great, fantastic, that's fine. I hope that you really enjoyed it. I hope that you got a whole lot from the 20 takeaways from reading 200 books. And I really hope that you are subscribed to this channel too. We can get some more people involved in the Bookmatic community. That would be fantastic. And also I'll leave some links down below if this is your first time visiting this channel. I'll leave some links down below to my newsletter, website. You can get some access to some PDFs, some great reading tips, and also book recommendations. And if you're not already following me over on Instagram, definitely check out that. And thank you so much for watching the video, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.